The gospel is so good, and we need to share it. Thank you, Chris. It's amazing. So we actually have a little change in the program, which I'm very excited about. So we weren't sure if this other speaker was going to be available today, and I'm very excited that he's here. And he's going to, his name's Dave Wiedis. He's part of the Serving Leaders Ministry, so he works with people in a variety of ways. He works with leaders who are pastoring other people, really on the forefront of self-care and addressing burnout. And he works with folks who are either struggling with the brokenness of being a victim of sexual sin, or somebody who is struggling with sexual sin in their own lives. So I wanted to invite David Wiedis up. I think that for many of us in the room, like trafficking might be the first time that you're hearing about trafficking. I'm hoping that God is kind of calling the folks in this room to really respond and show up for other people, whether that's in the anti-trafficking ministry or movement. Or if you're going to, I want to encourage and really, like, you're in this room for a reason. You have a heart. And there are a lot of people, there are a lot of churches in this area who have this information who aren't here today. And I want to encourage you guys to use that resource packet to actually research groups like Intentional Warriors and the structure that they offer in that small, intimate brotherhood setting. And really prayerfully consider bringing it to your community, to your friends' lives, and building this where you are. That this isn't just talking on a Saturday, taking notes, being moved, and God adjusting parts in our hearts. This is supposed to go out and have an effect in the lives of those who we love, who we see. Let's seek them out. And you guys in the room, like, that's your job. I hope that you'll take us up on the resources that we're offering. If you have any questions, please email us. We'll get you connected with the right people. So with that, I'm going to invite you up. Dave, thank you so much. I'll just give you this mic.
Thank you very much, Joy. Thank you. I'll be brief, but I do want to just acknowledge our speakers. And, sometimes when people get up and you get the end product of a process. Like, I'm thinking about, I wear this gold ring here, and all you see is this beautiful gold ring, but you don't see the process by which gold was mined from the ground, undergoes the crucible of burning, and then there's a product. You just got to hear a product, the end product of two people who have been in the fire personally. You don't get up and share these truths without having experienced a lot of pain, a lot of brokenness, a lot of experiences which are very, very difficult. You just get to hear these beautiful words that are truth. And so I just want to acknowledge that and thank you both for the ministries that you do and the work that you do and all the pain that you've been through and are going through to continue in ministry. It's difficult. So can we just acknowledge that? I have a ministry called Serving Leaders Ministries. There's a pamphlet out in the back if you'd like to learn more about it. But essentially, what our ministry does, we have about 10 counselors that work with us, and basically we minister to people who minister. Our goal is to create a safe and sacred place for people who are out there sharing the gospel, missionaries, pastors, anybody who's working in the church in a strategic way. That's what Serving Leaders does. And in the course of my ministry, I've had the occasion to talk with people who are ministering out in Bangkok, for example, the Philippines, doing work with sex in the sex trade, these kind of ministries. And the thing that I've noticed is that many people go out and are not really prepared to do the ministry. And so I just want to give you 5 quick points, some essential things. If you're called to do ministry with people, whether it's in the sex trade, that there are people in this room who are doing that, or otherwise. Just 5 quick things that I'd like to just share with you that are essential to doing this work, because you've got to be really careful when you're ministering and doing this kind of work. So number 1, which is really obvious, which has already been emphasized, is number 1 is know God deeply and be grounded in his word. Be grounded in prayer, as Christian just shared. That goes without saying. But that is not enough. Secondly, you've got to know your own heart. You have to really, really know your own heart. And by that, I mean a number of things. Number 1, you have to know your own areas of vulnerabilities, your own areas of weakness, your own areas of temptation. Now, there's a dilemma. Nobody really wants to know their own weaknesses. As a matter of fact, most of us spend our lives overcoming or compensating for our areas of weakness. We don't want to enter into that. But you have to. So as James was saying, you have to go below the waterline in your own life and understand your own motives of your heart, why you do, what your longings are, and what your temptations and weaknesses are. Because if you don't, it's the motives of the heart, the hidden motives of the heart for doing a noble ministry that make yourself feel good that can trap you. In other words, if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to end up trapped in the same sins that you're trying to rescue people out of. So you've got to be really careful and know your own heart and know yourself. And you only do that through self-reflection, prayerful self-reflection, where you're saying, God, you shine a light in my heart and expose those weaknesses, those vulnerabilities where I'm going to be most tempted. Because if you don't know that, you're going to get trapped. And the degree to which you don't know your own heart and your own motives is the degree to which you have the potential to be dangerous to other people. Unless you know why you're doing ministry, and if you're doing ministry out of a naivete or a grandiosity, which is basically a self-inflated idea of who you are, without understanding that you have to walk in the power of God and the power of God and the power of God, period. Unless you know that, you're going to be dangerous to the very people you're trying to help. Because ministry is not about you, it's about other people. And if your motive is to make yourself feel good, or to get out of your own guilt, or to or just to work out your own issues without without knowing your own issues, if you don't know them, they will bite you, they will hurt you, they will sabotage what you're doing, and you'll end up hurting other people. Does that make sense? So we've got to know our own hearts and know our own capacity for self-deception, arrogance, naivete, grandiosity. And a really good series of questions to ask yourself as you're ministering to other people is, where am I being naive? Where am I being arrogant? How am I deceiving myself? You heard both these men talk about the idea of, I got this, right? I got this. I got this. I'm not subject to that. I've got it. Well, let he who thinks he stand, take heed lest he fall. We have to look to ourselves first before helping other people. So unless you're willing to do the real hard work of your own stuff, you have no business trying to work with other people in their own hearts. You've got to understand that before the grace of God. And by the way, all of that work, all of that self-reflection, all of that under the waterline stuff is done through grace. And James was using this idea of mercy. I like to say, you look at yourself and your own stuff through the grace-filled eyes of Christ. If you can see yourself through grace-filled eyes rather than condemnation, rather than the pointing finger, you see, then that aids you in that process of healing and purity. So we have to know God, we have to know our own hearts, we have to know our capacity for self-deception, and we have to prepare properly. That's number 3. Realistic expectations. Ministry sounds great. The idea of rescuing people sounds great. The idea of helping people sounds great. But the reality of this is that ministry can be extremely lonely, and it can be very frustrating because you're working with populations that are resistant to change. You know, we have the image of the person who's held captive, and you just want to rescue and get her out. Yay, she's great, she's free. No, there's internal stuff and woundedness in her own heart that creates ambivalence and wants to keep her in. She doesn't necessarily want to escape. And when we try to do things that are not wise, we're hurting people. So we have to have realistic expectations and not be frustrated. And when there's working with people who have issues that work against recovery, we really have to understand what we're doing. We have to walk in wisdom and have solid training. So don't be afraid of getting good education like these kind of seminars. But, you know, in counseling, in trauma, in the multiple factors that create the situation that create sexual slavery and trafficking in the first place. Fourth, must be grounded in community and relationships. You cannot be a lone ranger in ministry, period. You have to be in a community that not only cares for you, but knows you and will reflect reality back to you. So that when you're doing your stuff, people are lovingly reflecting your stuff back to you and saying, you're being a jerk. You're being selfish. You're being grandiose. This is why we have spouses. I think we're all married to women who have said, stop your crap. Don't BS me, right? I know I am. And finally, understand how to exercise good, healthy self-care. Ministry is a stewardship that God gives you. It is not yours. And so it's not about burning out and sacrificing yourself to the point of burnout and flame out. Flame out is my term for moral failure. Ministry is a stewardship that you have to care for, and that means that you have to be in spiritual shape. You have to self-care. You have to know what your limits are. You have to embrace your limits, and you have to understand where you stop and where another person begins, understanding your boundaries and establishing good boundaries. So each of those things merit a long conversation, which we don't have time for today, but I appreciate the opportunity just to share with you, share my heart with you. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you for putting up with this guy and helping him. And really just appreciate being here. Joy?
Thank you so much. Yeah. A lot to unpack. Dave has a lot of resources. There's a lot of videos on his website and through their ministry, so I really do encourage you guys to check them out. It's also one of very few places in this area that does offer counseling to leaders, and it's really important. So what we're going to do now, I am going to invite Chris and James back up for a little Q&A. So if you guys have questions for either of them or for both of them, I will run the microphone around unless you guys want it. Can you guys see me all right? I'm quiet. Oh, you have a question? Yeah. All right. Right off the bat. Boom. Rapid fire. We can. Yeah.